In our previous session, we began exploring the topic of leadership and leadership development. We defined leadership in terms of getting results, looked at some symptoms of leadership failure, and introduced a model of leadership development for your practice. In this session, we will look more closely at how to practically implement that model. You might recall from the first session that the traditional model of leadership development was what we labeled the competency-based approach. This involves developing certain leadership qualities or characteristics in people, and then waiting in expectation for them to produce results. In contrast, the results-based approach seeks first to establish the desired outcomes and then develop people and processes to deliver those results. The three critical elements of the results-based model of leadership development are purpose, process, and passion. In his book, Coaching for Improved Work Performance, the author, Ferdinand Fornes, shares the results of a survey that asked the question, why don't employees do what they're supposed to do? The question was posed to 25,000 managers and supervisors from around the world in a variety of different industries. The overall response included 16 different answers, with the top 4 answers clearly being the most prevalent. Those answers were, number 1, they don't know what to do. Number 2, they don't know how to do it. Number 3, they don't know why they should do it. And number 4, they think they are doing it. Let's consider each one of them separately and see how our results-based model of leadership development might address each one. While many people know very well the tasks that they are expected to perform in their particular job, they may not know very well at all the overall outcomes that are expected from their work. This results in people that are very busy, but not very productive. The first critical element of the results-based model of leadership development is purpose. This requires giving people an overall big picture point of view of what is expected and the outcomes desired. One of the habits that Stephen Covey emphasizes in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is to begin with the end in mind. By concentrating on outcomes and results, the first cause of failure listed in the survey may be effectively addressed. There are a number of ways one might go about doing this. A well thought out mission statement is very useful for establishing purpose, but it must be more than just a flowery phrase that's framed on the wall of your hospital. It must really reflect what you and your hospital team are trying to do for your clients. As a test of the effectiveness of your current mission statement, ask each member of the hospital staff to write it down. Of course, they can't do so if you don't have one, so your first order of business would be to develop one. If you do have a mission statement, after everyone has had a chance to demonstrate that they know what it is, have each individual share what they contribute to accomplishing it. This should be expressed in terms of outcomes and results rather than tasks and duties. You might also review the current job descriptions that you have for your different staff positions. See whether or not they are more task-oriented than outcome-oriented. If so, you might consider sitting down with staff members and reworking the job descriptions to include areas of responsibility and overall outcomes and results that the person is required to deliver. Such an approach fosters a greater sense of ownership and encourages people to take initiative and exercise better decision-making. After establishing clear goals or desired outcomes, it is necessary to make sure that people have a clear understanding of how to do what it is that they are being asked to do. In many cases, what often passes for training is nothing more than a one-way conversation where the so-called trainer runs through a procedure or work process and then asks if there are any questions. Or even less effective is simply handing someone an employee handbook or paper and telling them to read over the material. While this may seem efficient in the time that it saves on the front end, it is ultimately inefficient and costs more time in the long run. A much better approach is to ensure that a clear process is in place by establishing best practices and transferring those best practices through a mentoring relationship. Best practices are created by documenting what the most exemplary performer in a particular area does and having others emulate that example. Mentoring is the transferring of learning and skills through a relational process of modeling and monitoring. The mentoring approach is simply outlined in 4 easy steps. Number 1, I do and you watch. Number 2, we do together. Number 3, you do and I watch. And number 4, you do. When this method is followed, not only is training accomplished, but quality assurance is built in, and the second element of our leadership model, process, is established. Questions and new ideas should be encouraged while maintaining adherence to previously successful ways of doing the work. Most people dislike busy work or simply doing things without clearly knowing or understanding why. Because I said so may be a good enough reason for children, but with adults, it most often leads to poor performance, lack of motivation, and ultimately anger and resentment. A much better approach is to seek to establish the third element of our leadership model, which is passion, and is directly connected to the why behind whatever it is we are being asked to do. When I've introduced this model in small group discussions, I often ask people which of the three critical elements, purpose, process, and passion, is most lacking in your workplace. Which one do you think that they say? If you said passion, you'd be in agreement with about 90% of respondents. Why do you think that is? It's quite often due in part to the fact that most people have not clearly defined the why behind their work. They don't have a clear understanding of the impact of their work on their team members or their customers. A lack of passion is also partly due to not having a clear understanding of the first two elements of our leadership model. Where there is no clear purpose and process, it is difficult to maintain any level of passion for the work. This reason is probably the most surprising, but also the most easily understood when one realizes it is simply due to the lack of proper feedback. How often do you do personnel reviews in your practice? If you're like most small businesses, you do your annual personnel reviews every couple of years. Without adequate and proper feedback, adjustments in performance cannot be achieved. The frequency and type of feedback given should correspond to the complexity of the work and the dynamics of how often the work changes or needs adjustment. Obviously, some work requires less attention and adjustment than others. No one likes to take a test and then not know the results of their effort. Typically, most people desire constructive feedback and want to know whether or not they are doing a good job or need improvement. To review, our three critical elements of the leadership development model are purpose, process, and passion. When properly applied, this leadership model can be used to effectively address the four most common causes of poor performance. Leaders are those individuals that demonstrate the passion to consistently apply themselves to a process in order to deliver desired results. These people merit greater degrees of responsibility, freedom, and compensation, and should be considered your practice's greatest asset. In our next session, we'll explore work environment or culture and how it affects both leadership and performance and what you can do to influence or shape it. Until then, remember, the more you do of what you've done, the more you'll have of what you've got.